Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is measures of central tendency. We mentioned these before. That's mean, median, and the mode. Okay, so remember mean means the average. Median means the middle number. And mode is the number that occurs the most. So what's important to remember about the median is that you have to order the numbers from least to greatest. So you have to order them from least to greatest. Okay, if you don't remember how to find the average, you add everything up and then divide it by the number of entries. Okay, so hopefully that helps. So let's look at example 1 then. So in order to find the mean and the median, we have to put them in order. So I'm going to reorder all of these house prices, starting with the lowest of 114. I cross them out as I order them. And then it goes 139. Okay, 150. 198. And then 223. So we have to put them in order from least to greatest to find the median. So now it's pretty clear. I'm just going to number these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have to find the middle number, which the middle number in this case is 150. So our median price is 150,000. Okay, the next thing we do is we find the mean price, which remember mean is when you add them all up. So take a moment and add them all up for me. Now that you've added them all up, hopefully you got 8,000 to 824,000. You divide that by 5 because that's how many houses there are. And you should get 164,800. Okay, so now we have to compare these two numbers. So when I compare them, I just write out mean and mode. Mean and median. Okay, so now we have to compare the mean and the median. So I noticed that the mean is larger than the median. So I know that 164,000 is bigger than 150,000. Okay, so now let's look at example 2. Okay, so in example 2, I forgot to put the weights in there. So let's start by writing the weights in. So it's 178, 142, 112, 150, 206, and then the last one is 130. So now I want you to pause the video and work on A, B, and I want you to take a shot at C. Okay, so hopefully you found the median and the mean pretty simply. Just keep in mind if you have two numbers that the median's in between, you add them up and divide by 2. So letter C was a little tricky. So our mean needed to stay the same, but our median, we needed to add 3 to it. So our median became 149, which you know is in the middle. If our mean needs to stay the same, we need to multiply that by the 9 entries we'll have. And that means our total weight that we need to get to is 1,377. So one number needs to be below the median and one number needs to be above the median in order to weigh out the middle number, right? So that means we needed to add up all the weights we have. When we do that, the total weight is 1,067. We need to get to 1,377. So between these two kids that we're adding, the two wrestlers, we have to add 310 pounds. And with that, so you could pick any two numbers as long as one's below 149 and one's above 149, as long as they add up to 310. So I personally chose 120 and 190 as my values. If you chose the other ones, that's fine, like 125 and 185. If you chose 140 and 170, that's also fine, okay? So as long as it's somewhere between the two. You could have even gone down to 100 and 210. That still would have evened out our median and our mean. Okay, so let's look at the next page. So let's go to page 2 and take some more notes, this time on dispersion. Okay, so dispersion has a lot of definitions here. Some of these are going to be new, some of these are going to be old. Like the word dispersion, I think might be new. So it's the spread of the data. So it's the spread of the data. How much does that data vary? Spread of the data. So really, how different is that data? And with that, we have range, which we know the range. It's the difference, that's the big one, difference between the largest and the smallest. Difference between the highest and the lowest number. Highest and lowest number. Okay, I'm doing some shorthand here, sorry. Then we have our quartiles. Think of the word quart and think about what that means. Quart, quad, kind of means 4. So it's when we divide our data into fourths. So it's when we divide our data into fourths. Okay, so we break it into 4 sections. And then from there, since it's quartiles, we have our first quartile. You may want to write small for these. Your first quartile is also called your lower quartile. So it could sometimes be called the first quartile or the lower quartile. And this is the median. So remember, median's the middle. So it's the median of the lower half of the data. And I'll show you how to find this in a moment, don't worry. So pretty much we're taking our lower half of our data and finding the median of it. Our second quartile is simply the median of all the data, or the middle. It's also called the middle quartile. So the second quartile, I struggle to write quartile, sorry. Second quartile and middle quartile is simply the median of all the data. So it's the median of all of the data. And then lastly, we have the third quartile. The third quartile, and that's also called the upper quartile. Okay, so it's also called the upper quartile. And if the lower quartile was the median of the lower half, this one's going to be the median of the upper half of the data. Okay. Last one is going to be the interquartile range. So interquartile range. We also write that as IQR. So that's how I'm going to shorthand it, because I hate writing all of that out. So just shorthand it to IQR. And that's when we take the third quartile. I'm just going to write third Q, and we subtract the first quartile. So when we take the first quartile and the second and the third quartile and subtract them. Okay. So now let's put this into examples. So if you need to pause and get all these notes, please do so. All right, so we have this example. There's 7 people. Here are their expenses for transportation and lodging. And we want to know which one is more spread out. So which one's more spread out? Spread out, remember, means dispersion. And since we want to know how much they vary, we want to find the range. So this is asking for the range of the data. So let's find the range of transportation. So the range of transportation and the range of lodging. Okay. So I'm going to highlight my biggest numbers. So for transportation, we have 912. For lodging, it's 612. Our smallest number for transportation is 211 and 311. Okay, so now range is biggest minus smallest. So for transportation, it's 912 minus 211, and you get 701. And for lodging, it's 612 minus 311. How weird, that's a band. Okay, focusing, sorry. So now we're looking at these two numbers, and which one varies more? Since transportation has the biggest number, it varies more, has a bigger transversion. So that means transportation is the answer. So transportation varies more, so that's our answer with a variation of 701. Okay, so I want you to look at example B and try to figure out what that's asking. So pause and try to figure out example B. So if you didn't understand what it was asking, pretty much it wants you to find the mean. Wants you to find the mean of both of them, of both transportation and lodging, and then add those up. So if you didn't do that, pause now, but I'm going to keep on going. So transportation, when you add them all up, it should be that number divided by 7. So when you're rounding, they spent on average $574 on transportation. For lodging, when you add them all up, you get $3,266 divided by 7. On average, they spent $467 on lodging. Add them up, and you should get $1,041 total that they could be expected to spend on trip. So on trip, this is what we expect them to do. And that's, again, because we added our transportation and our lodging together. All right, last page of the notes. Last page is just practicing what interquartile, how to find it, and what those quartiles really mean. All right, so let's look at these. Next page. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in order from least to greatest. So pause the video, put them in order, and then check with me. We don't need to find our median. We need to find our quartiles. So we need to find our first quartile, which is the median of the lower half. So we're looking at the lower half of my data here. Looking at my lower half, which is this yellow, and I have to find the median of that. But unfortunately, my median is between two numbers, so I need to find them. So my first quartile, I'm just going to write as first Q, is between 10 and 11. Divide by 2, and you get 10.5 is your first quartile. Now we need to find your third quartile or our third Q. And that's when we find the average of the upper half. Okay, the upper half. The middle numbers are between 15 and 16. So 15 plus 16 divided by 2 is 15.5. So now what we need to do is our IQR to find our interquartile range. We do our third quartile minus our first quartile. So then we do 15.5 minus 10.5, and you get an interquartile range of 5. So again, we just looked at the lower half of the data, found our median, looked up at the upper half of our data, found the median, and subtracted them. Okay, so now let's look at example 4. Example 4, the daily high temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit of a town are recorded for 1 year. The median, remember median means middle, so this is talking about the middle number is 62 degrees. The interquartile range of high temperatures is 32. Which statement is most likely true? So median means it's the middle number. So I'm going to say the middle number, but this is talking about percentages. The middle number is about 50% of the data, right? 50% of the data. So which one says that 50% of the data is greater than 62 degrees? Because that's what this tells me. 52 is right in the middle, so either 50% is less than 62 or 50% is greater. So that's going to be example C then. Okay, so I want you to take a moment and I want you to try 5 and 6. When you're done, check your answer. Okay, so upper quartile is about 75% of that data. So we're saying Jack's score is greater than 75% of those students because he's on the upper quartile. Example 6 should be B. That's saying 50% complete their test in 110 minutes, and that's because the median is 110. Okay, so get started on your 2 activities now.